Today we're going to talk about Eucalyptus pulverulenta. Using eucalypts in your home garden doesn't always work. I mean, they're big trees, quite often they drop limbs, and sometimes growing other things around them is very hard. But what I want to show you now is a Eucalyptus Silver-leaved Mountain Gum, which grows in New South Wales. It's quite rare in its native habitat, but it has real garden context. What we do with this eucalypt, and we can see it here in front of us, is we prune this every year, and all we're looking for is abundance of this beautiful foliage, because this foliage in the garden context creates wonderful colour, but it also provides great contrast to other plants that you have around it. So this is not a traditional way of using eucalypts in the garden. This foliage not only creates this, great colour, but it has a wonderful aroma. Like if you really run your hands over that, it's just amazing. And what I'll do when I finish pruning these, I just take bundles of this inside and put it in a vase. The key to this is we prune it at a particular time in the year. With these eucalypts, you cannot prune this in the middle of winter. We wait until the end of September, just the beginning of October, the soil's warming up, the weather's warming up, and we give it a really hard prune. A lot of eucalypts, and this eucalypt, respond very well to this type of pruning because they have a lignituber. Now, a lignituber is something that eucalypts have developed in response to fire, so that a eucalypt forest can be burnt and it'll regrow because of the lignituber. And if we have a little look in here, the lignituber exists right at the base of the tree, and sometimes it's even underground. But when the fire comes through and burns all that foliage, that is where the growth comes from, this lignituber. So when we prune these, as long as we know it's at the right time of the year, we can prune them very hard and they will respond with a flourish of foliage very quickly. So that if we prune them in October, probably by the end of November, December, we have this full flush of foliage. I mean, this foliage now is a year old. We prune it down and we get the same foliage in the next 12 months. I'm going to start pruning this, and we can see quite clearly when I pull back some of the foliage just where the last year's stems were. And some of those haven't shot from exactly the stem, but they come from buds underneath. So in pruning this, we really literally are taking everything off. There's no technical buds that we have to go back to. We like to have nice clean cuts, but we prune everything off and we take it down to that base. And it's really a technique called coppicing. We literally take it right back to the ground and we get that reflush very quickly, given we do this at the right time of the year. Even these little ones, it's just such amazing foliage. And if you take this inside or rub against it, you'll get this aroma that just lasts for hours. It's really, you take it home and it's just so beautiful. It's kind of a brutal way of pruning in some ways, very dramatic, but given the warming up of the weather and the soil, you will see new buds appearing around this very quickly, so it's you don't have to put up with the pain for too long. So I'll just keep going. When using secateurs, you've really got to have a great pair of secateurs, and these are Felco. They're very sharp, and I look after them. You oil them sort of once a week, and every month or so I'll give them give the blade a bit of a sharpen. The other thing with large ones, you always cut and pull at the same time, and then you get a nice clean cut. So if I'm going to cut, I then at the same time I'm putting a little bit of pressure on the branch away from where I'm cutting, and it just allows a clean snap. And that's particularly important on slightly larger branches that aren't easy to cut through. You just give it a little push as you're cutting and it's a clean cut. It's the way to go. Clean up some of this little stuff. We'll almost need to come back and actually see this in the next 12 months just to prove to people that it actually works. But it's a very different way of using eucalypts in the garden, and I think it's a really beautiful way to do them, particularly if we start to bring other plants into play with them. So what we're left with is a mountain of this beautiful foliage, and I always take armfuls of this inside. It just is wonderful for the vase. You could probably even sell it to the florist industry if you wanted to grow enough of it, because they really look for this kind of foliage. But what I also recommend, because it's very soft foliage, here in the Botanic Gardens we'll put this into green waste, we'll cut it up and it just goes into our composting system. But because it is actually quite soft, it's not very woody, at home I would recommend you cutting it up into smaller pieces and just putting it in your compost, and it'll actually compost really well, and it'll be perfect to reapply to the garden. So there's no wastage. So really, if we sum it up, this is an alternative way to grow Eucalyptus pulverulenta, or the Silver Mountain Gum, in your home garden. It's a little bit more horticulturally driven in that we have to prune it once a year, but I think it has lots of value. Good luck.